Hello, Australia. Welcome to episode number 9 of the Layback Podcast. I'm Jackson Allen, and this is a podcast about Australian climbers and Australian climbing stories. Actually, someone asked me the other day, hey Jackson, why do you say hello Australia at the start of each episode? And I guess I needed a catchphrase, given that it was an Australian audience that the podcast was targeted towards. It seemed apt. And but actually, 40% of the people who are tuning into the podcast, they're tuning in from outside Australia, from the US, New Zealand, the United Kingdom. So to those of you, hello, thanks for listening. And thanks for showing an interest in Australian climbing culture. Since the last podcast, we've actually hit 10,000 listens. I want to give a big shout out to all of the people who have shared the podcast on social media, who've sent me messages, who've liked us on Facebook and Instagram. If you haven't done those things yet, please go over and do so. Send us a message. Even if it's just feedback for the interviewee, they do put a lot of their heart and their energy into these podcasts, and they like to hear from you. So, don't be shy. Send us a message, and I'll forward it on. In this episode, we feature Simon Weill, also known by the nickname Arnie, a climber from Victoria, who I first came across on this YouTube video, a video of a climb called Middle Path at the Moorline Crag in the Grampians. Here's this guy who's kind of stockier than your average climber, tattoos on the left arm. Looks like maybe he should be an MMA fighter rather than a climber. But he, floats up this route, gets to the final traverse into the chains where the cameraman happens to be getting in his way. And as he makes his way towards the cameraman, he leans in and he says to the cameraman, "Get the fuck out of my way." And that was my first impression. I think my second impression was when I read something that Ross Taylor wrote in Vertical Life about Simon being pricklier than a ball cactus. It wasn't until about 2 years ago when I met Arnie in person at the Grampians Bouldering Festival. He was actually giving a tour of a bouldering area called the Bleachers, an area he developed, an area he was instrumental in developing. And it was when I met him there that kind of perception just completely melted away. Simon is a really down-to-earth guy. He's fun to be around, fun to climb with. He's got a big heart and he cares a lot about the communities that he's involved in, not just in climbing, but outside of climbing also. In this episode, we get into his climbing origins. I had him pegged as a boulderer, but he's actually, started off his climbing as a trad climber, climbing on bluestone in Melbourne, making his way to Arapiles and kind of cutting his teeth on trad climbs out there. Definitely, he's done a lot of sport climbing, and but his main thing has been I kind of think bouldering development in the last period. And so we really get stuck into that in this podcast. We talk about bouldering history and development of bouldering in the Grampians and in Victoria. We talk about development and I guess his drive for that, his process for developing and what he sees the future of development being in Victoria. We talk also a bit about the other things in his life. With all the interviewees, I guess climbing is the one thing that everyone has in common, but I really like to dig in and find out about the things that are outside of their life, outside of their climbing life that they do. And Simon actually runs a restaurant. He also does other sports, in particular Brazilian Ju Jitsu, and we talk a bit about that. He's recently become a father. We talk about how that has or has not changed his approach to climbing. And kind of how he manages all those things together. And yeah, it was really enjoyable. I had a really good time with this one, and I hope you enjoy listening to it. We kick it off in a conversation around a recent trip that he's just come back from to Rocklands in South Africa. Enough from me. Let's get into it. Here it is. You recently got back from Rocklands.
Yes.
How was that?
It was great. Yeah. I've been there a bunch of times. So it's a, I don't know, it's just a primo destination for our winter.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's limitless. There's so much sandstone there. So it's great. And it was awesome with the little guy. So, with a kid, it's kind of easy. And yeah, a lot of people are a bit like, man, you seriously went to South Africa with a kid? And it's like, well, you're kind of going to South Africa, but where you are, you're so far out of everything. It's pretty safe. Like, you don't ever feel insecure out there. Obviously you have to go to Cape Town and drive through Cape Town, but even that is not, I think, you can alleviate some of those risks, sort of, if you're smart and,
you can minimise it.
Yeah, that's right. You just drive during the day and, Cape Town's not Johannesburg, so it's not, it's not the same, but...
And that was because you're just newly a dad, right? So it's the first time traveling with him in tow.
Yeah, well, we've been to Sydney a couple of times to visit grandparents, but the first long haul, which was pretty interesting. We all had gastro on the way over, which was all time. Thankfully, it kind of made him just pass out for the whole flight, which was cool. And then he slept the whole way back, so we were pretty chuffed with that. But yeah, no, Rocklands is awesome. It's a great place. It's
there was a huge Australian contingent there, from what I saw, kind of around Instagram and so forth. Lots of Aussies there this year.
Yeah, lots of Sydney-siders, lots of guys from up there. Good crew, actually. It was really nice. It was good for us having other people around who are sort of into kids and happy having a screaming child around. Amy didn't get to do much climbing. She was sort of pretty much on full-time mum duty, which I thank her very much for.
Yeah, you've kind of in debt on the parental credits there a bit now.
Let's not talk about that too much. She might hear this and start some sort of regimen. But he's pretty high maintenance with his sleeps and stuff during the day. But so she took the hit on that one, and I got to go climbing. So it was pretty cool.
Any good sends? Any?
It was a bit of a tricky trip this time round. I went in pretty underdone. I haven't been able to do a huge amount of sort of specific training.
Courtesy of being your dad now.
Yeah, just that and, work and just time restraints really at this stage. It's been a busy year. But yeah, I guess most of that is down to being a dad. You try to put most of your spare time into hanging out with the little dude and backing up Amy when I can. But yeah, so I didn't get to train much, so I wasn't at my strongest when I got there and promptly got injured. I tore my hamstring. I did a medial ligament in my knee, and then I sort of did a pulley as well, all on the same day. The pulley was pretty minor to start with, and then over the next few weeks I kind of really ramped that up. So I'm on no climbing detail for another couple of weeks at the moment. So pretty frustrating, but it is what it is. So
it's a pretty international scene there, yeah. Rocklands.
Yeah, huge amount of euros. It's an easy trip for them.
Yeah.
Like, it's super cheap.
Yeah.
With pounds or with euros or whatever else, and it's on the same time zone. So for them, it's a breeze. So pretty jealous of the euros when they get to go home and not have to deal with jet lag. It's pretty rough this year. Yeah. So, but look, it's a cool place. It's kind of good for everyone. There's lots of different stuff in all grade ranges, and it's good that there's a new guidebook that sort of has opened up all these new areas, because it sort of dispersed people. Our first week, we were there with another mate, Damo from Halls Gap, and we really didn't see anyone else at the Crags for the first week, which was unbelievable. So yeah, it was awesome.
Well, that's good. I know I've heard that some kind of early talk around the impact that it's having over there, with a lot of internationals going hit the same spots a lot. So.
There's definitely that. There is, like anywhere, climbing is for sure having an impact on some of the rock. And some people, I don't know, it just seems like they treat it a bit different because it's not in their own country. Tick marks and, brushing chalk off and just generally being shit at looking after the rock. It's a bit frustrating, and, you try to educate people a little bit without being overbearing, but, there definitely is a bit of impact. There's some absolute classics there that people have kind of done to death, same as everywhere, It's getting into that sort of 20-year time frame where people have been going there for, and even bullet hard sandstone starts to show the the effects of people being there. And I guess it's also because the season's so short, people really ram it for 2 or 3 months and then disperse. So yeah, if stuff's not getting rain and getting weathered, it doesn't seem to get cleaned up, and there's not a huge amount of rain there. So
yeah, I was following your trip on Instagram, and you've got the Instagram handle Block Monster Arnie. How did you get the nickname Arnie?
There's a bit of conjecture about that one, actually. Some unkind souls suggested I gave it to myself, which I can say right now is not true.
Set the record straight.
Yeah, correct. For all those people who are interested, my friend Mullet Pete, actually, who's an old friend of mine, started calling me Arnie because I used to like to lift weights when I was a young man, and that's where it came from. And it stuck. So it's a much cooler name than Simon, let's be honest. So yeah, and then I may have self-perpetuated it a little bit going forward, but I did not come up with it in the first place.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us, why do you climb? What's in it for you?
Good question. I've just, I've been climbing for virtually my entire life. So I started climbing when I was 12. I'm 41 now, and I've never really had any big breaks from it. I've just always enjoyed it. I enjoy the camaraderie of it. I really like being around, most climbers. And I love being outdoors, and I just love the movement of climbing rock and the problem solving aspect and the physicality of it. And it's kind of got everything that I want in a sport and also in a pastime, it's kind of all encompassing. So yeah, and it's been such a rewarding way of sort of traveling and seeing the world and meeting people. And yeah, I often think about what I would do or what I would have done if I hadn't have found climbing, and I very rarely come up with a satisfactory answer. So, yeah.
How did you discover climbing?
I started climbing with a guy at school. He was a mate who was in the year above me at school, and he said he was going climbing and would I be interested in giving it a go? And I was like, yeah, let's have a look at what it's all about. So he must have been 13 and I was 12, and we went down to a bridge in Melbourne on Bridge Road where the boat sheds are. Did some top roping on some bluestone pillars with a sailing rope and a couple of homemade harnesses. And yeah, I was basically hooked from day one. I think I made him go out again the next weekend, and then the weekend after that. And then, yeah, that was it.
What was it about? I mean, because when you describe that climbing like bluestone pillars, it doesn't sound very, well developed like what we would think about climbing these days. Was it challenging to get to the top of the bluestone?
Yeah, there was like with anything, the bluestone blocks are not all the same. They're all kind of handcrafted, I guess, or hand cut or whatever. And so they're all different. So every pillar would have, at least 4 different routes on it. And so we just kind of move around those, and, there's some with like little arches on them. And it was just, I don't know, it was good fun, and it was physical, and it was different. And I was always kind of drawn to doing different things. So I'd done gymnastics, and then I kind of had to pull out of that. I can't remember why, but I stopped doing gymnastics, and which I loved, and climbing seemed to fill that void perfectly. Yeah. And I still played cricket and footy and, all the other kind of normal sports, so to speak. But yeah, I loved climbing straight away, and I've done it ever since. After I was about 15, I reckon, every school holidays I would end up at Arapiles just camping for a couple of weeks with randoms and just trad climbing. And yeah, I wish I had have discovered training a bit earlier, but yeah.
I mean, how did it develop? Like, were there people that you met, like, that could mentor you and take you out? Because I don't recall that the gym scene was really that well developed in the mid-90s.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There weren't many people, and yeah, I guess I was never. I sort of you fall in with people, and I've got I met some people that I climb with, and the original guy that I climbed with, Mike, I climbed with him a little bit. And we would go out to Arapiles, etc. But he had shoulder injuries early on. He's a really big guy. He was like 6'4" or 6'5", and he had quite like thin shoulders, and he just had shoulder injuries early on. So I started climbing with him, and then he kind of dropped by the wayside really quickly. And then I met other people, but not really anyone that I still climb with or anything. There's a few people, but I just loved it, and I would just kind of try to hook up with anyone that I could. Or
what style of climbing were you doing?
Pretty much all trad. There wasn't much else really. Okay. There's the odd sort of carrot bolt, et cetera, at Arapiles, but we didn't even go to the Grampians back then. It was just, that place was something different. You just catch a bus to Horsham and then hitch from Horsham to Natty, and then try and get a ride from Natty to the Mount. So it was Arapiles or nothing really. A bit of top roping on some harder stuff, but and then often I would spend time kind of just climbing with other just hanging out with school groups and stuff. They'd be up there and they'd see this 15-year-old kid just kind of moseying around. They'd be like, "What are you doing?" So I did a bit of that, and met a few people, but it was mostly on your own sort of thing, or with one other mate that you've dragged up and you're trying to teach him how to belay, and
And so how did you, because I most associate you with bouldering now, right? I've seen a bit of you dabbling in sport in the past, like photos of you doing sport routes and some YouTube videos and so forth. But how did you, because you started with trad, and bouldering is almost the antithesis to trad, like within our scene. How did it get from there to here?
It was just kind of a natural progression. I just, I guess bouldering didn't exist in my mind when I started, and it wasn't a thing. We're talking, I don't know, 1990 or 1991, I guess. So bouldering wasn't a big thing. And there was a bit of hard sport climbing, but no one really bolted easier stuff. So it was trad, and then, a bit of easier sport climbing. And then when I hit sort of, I guess, 17, 18, or even 16, 17, 18, I started training at some gyms that had some bouldering. Like there was the gym in Mount Alexander Road. I can't remember what that place was called, the one that burnt down in suspicious circumstances.
Okay.
And the paper factory next door. Do you remember that place?
No.
I can't remember what it's called.
It does sound like an insurance job.
Yeah, well, it was the paper factory that burnt down. The climbing gym was weird. It was really weird. So it was owned by I think he was a former SOG guy, and he was cool, but there was a shooting range inside the building.
There's a shooting range in the
climbing gym. So you had like the shooting range, and then the bouldering was on top of the shooting range, and then there were kind of routes all around, and it was pretty interesting scenes. And that was on the other side of Melbourne to where I live, so it would take an hour and a half to get there, and then you train, and then for sure. But I was into it, on holidays and stuff. If I wasn't away, I'd climbing would be the whole day when you could train for 4 or 5 hours. But anyway, you asked me how I got into bouldering. So I ended up just going to the gyms, and then I eventually ended up working at the Mill in Collingwood, which was another climbing gym that existed for a while in town. And that had a pretty good bouldering area. And I just sort of fell into it. I just started training there, and I liked bouldering. And I love route climbing, like I really do. But it's just the ease of bouldering. It's such an allure. But I love trad climbing. I did a huge amount of trad climbing when I lived in Sheffield, and I did a lot of sport over there on the limestone, and then bouldering as well. If I had my choice, I'd be good at all three, but bouldering's it's easy access. And when I lived up in the Grampians on my own, it was quite often I'd just be out for arvo sessions and stuff, and so I just went bouldering, So
what was like the state of bouldering, I guess, in the early noughties, like around that time? Like, was there a lot going on?
No, there was nothing. I think my first bouldering day was up at the cave. I went up with, I don't know, it might have been Roscoe, Taylor or someone like that. And we ran into Dave Jones up there. And Dave Jones had this homemade mat that was like, it was like falling onto a thermarest. And so I remember the first boulder that I properly tried outside was, what's that thing along the lip at the cave? That
the V5 or whatever?
No, the 8 that comes into the pocket.
I can't recall, but
you'd know it. Anyway, sit start, you go up into this undercling pocket, and then you kind of pull up into a roof, and there's this kind of mushroom of rock underneath it that any decent pad would totally stop these days. But Dave had his mat on that, and it was just like like an old foam mattress that you would sleep on with just wrapped in gaffer tape. And I fell on that, and I don't reckon my spine's ever been the same. It was...
So you felt like you took like one of those nasty falls that are pretty nasty even on today's mats, just bang onto this thermarest with a rock under it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Took the wind out of me for a little while. I think Dave probably just rolled me out of the way and just kept climbing. But
you were keen to go back at it.
Yeah, I was frothing. I was pretty into it. And then, sort of people started appearing. We kept soldiering on. We used to go to the cave a bit. And, there was a pretty small... I guess because I wasn't into developing, we were just sort of going out and doing stuff that we'd heard had been done, and we had some online like printed guide or something that Clem and Tony had sort of written up, and I think Julian Saunders and those guys kind of had that information, and so we climbed with them a lot, and then I met my friend Matt Tate, and so there was a bit of a scene coming together. Pads were kind of few and far between, and outrageously expensive for the Povo students that we were, and and we were tight asses like all climbers. It's the unfortunate part of this sport that it doesn't matter how long people have been climbing for and how much money they have, they're still dirtbags. It's quite funny. So yeah.
How was bouldering like how did it sit in the Australian scene at that point in time, like compared to say sport climbing and trad climbers at Arapiles? Like how was it viewed or received?
Yeah, it was pretty segmented, because you've definitely, and it's still sort of that way today, you've got the old school trad climbers who look at you with disdain, and you're like, well, actually, man, I was one of you, and, I still enjoy my trad, but, and I guess we didn't really make it easy because we were loud and obnoxious, and we used to play music, and, there'd be big groups of us, and they'd never seen such things before. So it was pretty split up, but we all I still sport climbed a lot back then, so I sort of felt like I was part of those two things, and I still would go to Arapiles, and some days you go bouldering on some of the boulders, and then other days you go and climb, and some trips you do all three,
Yeah.
So I sort of always, I don't know, it seems like it was only ever a sort of fight between young and old, it was never like sport climbers and boulderers didn't get along, or trad climbers and sport climbers didn't get along. It was more, there was a few wars about bolting and stuff for a while, but I was never really involved in that. I've never been into the bolting side of things, so I wasn't really part of it. I probably had an opinion on it because I was opinionated little shit, but but climbers and just climbers in general and boulderers kind of got along reasonably well, I think, as I recall. Yeah, who knows? How
do you think the bouldering culture, like in Australia, differs from those other cultures? Like these days?
Bouldering's it's become like a real fashion sport, It's become, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just not, it's just become really popular really quickly. And it's not really, I guess it's not really grown in the way that other sports have, like slowly, and there's been some good management of it and stuff. So you go to the crags and, there's people kind of not doing the right thing, and it's hard to try to educate those people without sounding like a tosser. And so, yeah, it's just a different thing. People go to the gyms, they start bouldering, then they can go outside straight away. You don't need any gear really, you just need your shoes and a chalk bag and you're in.
Yeah.
Whereas
low barrier to entry.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's it's easy for people to get outside and just go and do their thing, and and sometimes it's great, and then other times, the next thing you're calling in an ambulance for someone who's busted their ankle because they don't really know what they're doing, or they don't know where to put their mats, and no one's teaching people that sort of shit though. Yeah. No one really taught us. You just sort of had to learn, and sometimes you learn it the hard way. And I was just lucky. I had really, I had good people around me, and still do, I guess. I've still got...
They do talk about like Clem Loscott a lot, in the bouldering guidebook for the Grampians, for example, and this kind of contingent of the Austrians that came out, and there was a big charge on bouldering development. Were you there during that time?
I wasn't really, no. I actually never met those guys.
Yeah.
During that trip. I met like a couple of the other guys who were with them and came back, or were there a little bit later. But I mean, look, think about what it would have been like to turn up to the Grampians as a boulderer and no one had ever done anything. Like, those guys just tore it apart. Yeah. And they did it all over the world. Like Clem, in my mind, is probably, he's a bit forgotten now, but he was a monster.
Yeah.
Him and Fred and
Fred Nicole.
Yeah. Like those guys are probably the two most like adventurous guys who have been everywhere. Any guidebook that you go to in the world, you open it up and there's like an 8B from Fred or an 8B from Clem or Tony or, those guys. And they've been doing it for like Fred's amazing just for his longevity. Yeah. He's still crushing hard. And, and he's got 2 new hips or at least 1. But yeah, whereas Clem's kind of, because he's not into it anymore as much, I'm sure he probably still climbs 8B, but he's into his surfing and all sorts of other stuff. He's sort of been forgotten a little bit, and I reckon people are sleeping on that guy because he was a monster. Like his stuff still stands up today for sure. And in Rocklands, there's heaps of things that he did, like that ray of light problem. You would have seen, people are, it's still 8B, and it was done 15 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that.
Yeah,
he's a monster.
Yeah. So you've traveled a lot around the world over the years, right? Like, I mean, we could sit here and just list it off for ages. Like you bowled in the UK, you lived over there for a while.
Yeah.
Obviously South Africa, Rocklands, we were talking about that.
Yeah.
Japan, Thailand, everywhere. How have you seen the bouldering scene or the climbing scene, I guess, and probably more want to understand bouldering, but compares from like Australia to international?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Do we have like a unique Australian bouldering scene?
Wow, everything about Australia is pretty unique, like in terms of the way things are. It was always a little bit divisive early on between states. There was always your group of climbers from Vic and then your New South Wales climbers. But it's sort of, and for a long time, like it's only the last few years where, you go to a crag and you're like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, up until then, it was always like, oh, hey, man, how you doing? Good to see you, hugs all around, because you knew everybody. And climbing was like that for a really long time. And it really is only the last sort of handful of years where it's, it's gotten really popular and you go to places and you're just like, I've never seen any of these people before at all. It's the same when you go to the gyms now. You walk into a gym and you're just like, who are these people? But, the culture's still, I don't know, it's reasonably social, but it's always been, the Grampians has always been a bit funny because there's never been a central place where people gather, afterwards. You had Stapleton, which was, I mean, I guess a lot of people who are going to listen or who have started climbing in the last, 10 years, Stapleton, they would never really would have had the experience of staying there. But the Stapleton campground was originally the kind of gathering place, and everyone used to camp there. And so you would go there at Easter and there'd be hundreds of people camping there, and they'd all be climbers. There'd be a few unfortunate families that decide to spend their break there, but they the rest of the time it was just climbers. And so there was a good scene then. It was really strong, and it was pretty social, and there'd be good parties and people blowing shit up and burning stuff. Like any group of idiots. Yeah, correct. Yep. Thank God we don't have a lot of firearms in this country.
Yep.
But it seems to have, with the demise of the Stapleton campground, that's really like disappeared.
Yeah.
And now it's quite fragmented. You've got a few Halls Gap climbers, and then you've got your Melbourne day trippers, and then you've got a few people who stay at Mount Zero cabins, and it's just, there's not one place where people gather. And so unless you run into people at the crag and you know them, or you get chatting to them, it doesn't seem like there's like a really strong together scene like there is in Europe. Like if you go to any place in Europe, say like Magic Wood or I don't know, just let's say Magic Wood, for example, everyone camps in the one spot or everyone stays in the accommodation in one spot. That's all there is.
Yeah.
And so you meet people, and people, get along. Like, and I guess growing up with the gym scene in Europe, that's probably, it's a sport that people take seriously. Climbing's actually a sport that people care about in Europe, whereas climbing's been like this kind of, it's just, degenerates and, scumbags who climb. It's always been a bit of a fringe sport in Australia, I reckon. And
do you think that that's an accurate interpretation?
I think it definitely in the past has attracted those kinds of people. It doesn't seem to be the same now. It seems to be like, it's got this real clean-cut image now, which I don't like. But
no.
Well, it's just, I mean, look, the whole comp side of things and the gym side of things has brought in a different, like just a different group of people. And that's not bad per se, but I kind of enjoyed that, outlaw sort of
Because if we
lifestyle.
hark back to your story about you climbing on those bluestone poles, you talked about it being different to AFL and traditional sports. There was like a difference there that maybe is not as apparent or
absolutely. It's not the same as it was. And like, you know, it's still, what I liked about it is being out in the bush, just kind of with your mates. And now it's out in the bush with 200 of your mates, you know, and there's just, it's kind of, there's just, there's a certain amount of rock to go around, and, you know, that's sort of that. So just, I don't know. I liked it in the old days when it was kind of not the done thing. That's definitely one of the things that attracted me to climbing is other people are not really into it. I like that. I just like doing my own thing and kind of always have. So.
It ebbed and flowed though over the years from what I've heard, right? Like it got popular at points. And do you think we're just going through a phase of popularity?
I hope so. To be honest, I hope it's not on an upward trend, you know, because I don't think that the environment within which it works can tolerate all those people for a long period of time unless it is kind of regulated in a way. And, you know, that may not be a popular way of looking at it, but I just think, you know, you've got to be a little bit careful with your natural resources. And, you know, I say that from a gifted position because I've had, you know, such a long time of climbing and such a long time of kind of doing my own thing. And I don't want regulation and I don't want it to change. But, you know, if there's 200 people at a particular bouldering area each weekend, then, something kind of needs to give. And that I guess that's kind of where we're at with some of the access issues. Although I don't think that's their justification for it. I think they've fucked that up entirely. But
we'll get to that. Let's get to that. But let's talk about the glory days of bouldering development in the Grampians.
Okay.
How did you get into development? Was it just a natural thing because you were run out of boulders to?
I never ran out. I wasn't strong enough to do all the harder test pieces, so I just went off and found my own. No, it was one of those things where, you know, if you spend enough time going to the same areas, you know, you get bored like with anything. You know, I got sick of going to Anderson's. I got sick. I really didn't enjoy climbing at the cave. It's not a style that I particularly enjoy. I don't. You know, I like topping out on boulders, you know, I like climbing up, and the cave was just like, I don't know, and I was shit at it, so I didn't enjoy it very much. I couldn't cut loose, which is kind of...
You like to cut loose?
Well, I'm not a very good climber, so, you know, I do a lot of cutting loose because my technique's not very good.
I got the impression you love the, like, refrigerator hug. Every time I see a picture of you, you're, like, squeezing down on some big bulbous, not jugs, but, like, slopey...
I do. I love to squeeze. Yeah, I like to hug, you know?
Yeah.
I
like to hug the rock.
I'm a hugger.
Yeah.
It's maybe it's down to Jiu Jitsu as well, I'm not sure. But, yeah, I got bored of going to the same places, and it's sort of... I don't remember it ever... I don't even remember the first ever, you know, new boulder I did. I just sort of started, you know, just, I guess, walking around. And if you spend enough time in areas where you've done a lot of climbing, you're looking for, I guess you see something one day and you're like, I wonder if that's been climbed. And, you know, it's not in the guidebook, so I'll go up it, and it just progressed from there. And now I just enjoy it. And I've had a lot of time on my own in the Grampians because I lived up there this was, I guess, 10 or 12 years ago now when I was working up there, and I had a lot of time on my hands, and so I would develop, and then on the days when I wasn't climbing or it was wet, I would just go for a walk, and so I've just done that. And it you know, I've had times where we had big groups of people and we developed, like when we developed the tower, that was with a whole group of kind of people over a year or two, and you know, those are some of the fondest memories I have of climbing, you know, just going around with a bunch of mates and just doing new stuff. It's awesome. And, you know, it was one of those things where we had people who were climbing V3 right up to people who were climbing, you know, really hard, and everyone would have something to do. You'd just, you know, brush up a line, throw a rope down something. And actually that kind of came a little bit later. We didn't really top down clean stuff for a while, which I wish I had gotten into earlier. But yeah, it's just something that I've sort of fallen into, and now I love it. I love walking around and finding new stuff and looking for the perfect line.
Yeah. So. What is it about it? Like what? that's like kept you doing it? Because like, I mean, it's one thing to discover something and do it for a little while, but you've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know. I like doing new stuff. I get bored doing the same old things, and I'm not very good at projecting. Like I've never been, unless it's a first ascent, I very rarely spend kind of multiple sessions on something. I just like doing new things, and I like walking, and I'm not very good at sitting still for long periods of time. So yeah, if we've got a place in the Grampians, and if there's a day where I'm not climbing or the weather's not great or whatever, I'll just go for a walk and go find some stuff and pin it and then head back to it if there's something good there. And yeah, most of the time you find something. Sometimes it's, you find something that might be miles from the car and you kind of have to weigh up whether you're going to bother going back or not. And then other days, man, I have walked for full days and found nothing, like nothing. And some of those days I've done it with pad on my back and it's just brutal. But I don't know, somehow remain pretty enthusiastic about putting up new stuff.
What do you think separates the developers from the average climber? Like what's the difference in the...
I don't know, stupidity, time, maybe time. Yeah. I don't know. If you've got a lot of time on your hands, maybe. Some guys are just, super strong. They do lots of stuff and then they just want to go and find other things. And then other people just like walking around, and I don't know. There is, there's so much to do still with bouldering for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
It's different to sport climbing for sure. Where in some areas it's probably reaching its sort of critical mass, but bouldering, you're always going to be able to find bits and pieces to do. It just really depends on how willing you are to explore.
Yeah.
So, which seemingly I have an abundance of time and effort for.
Yeah. Is there a part of it like, you get to name the problem? I've never put up like a first ascent on a boulder that would be recognized.
Yeah.
Is there something to it about being able to name it, like leaving a legacy behind in a way, kind of maybe cheating death? Like you're going to leave this line that forever has your style, your name imprinted on it?
No, not really.
No,
because I've never really. I kind of enjoy naming things, and I always have a list on my phone of if I'm reading an interesting book and there's something in there about, I don't know, something I find interesting. It'd just be a random name or a random collection of words that I find entertaining or funny or interesting or topical. I just chuck them in my phone in my notes, and I've always got 50 or 60 names ready to go. But I don't write down anything. I don't map anything. I've had this for the last 2 years. I've been trying to find those boulders that I found like 3 or 4 years ago with my friend Chook. And for the life of me, I can't find it. And it was this massive boulder, and it was maybe 20 or 30 meters from off a dirt road. Yeah. And I can't even find it. I can't find the dirt road. I don't even know where it was. I can't remember. So I don't kind of write things down or map them out. And so it's got nothing to do with legacy. I just like doing it.
Yeah.
And take some photos of it and off you go back into the bush, on to the next one.
Getting into that naming process, so how do you filter down on the names? Like what makes a cut, what doesn't? How do you?
There's no rhyme or reason for that, man. There's just some of them are funny, some of them are topical, others are just ridiculous.
What's your favourite problem name?
Oh wow, that's really putting me on the spot.
Like yours or maybe someone else's? Like, what's the best problem name in the world?
Oh man, that's pretty tough. Some of the names that taking the features of the rock are pretty cool, like that Eye of Sauron thing that I did in Rocklands this trip. That's one of it's the quality of the problem that kind of gives it the aura that it has to me. But the name's pretty cool because the kind of crux move is matching in this kind of slopey eye, and then you pop to the top, and so the Eye of Sauron that's pretty cool. It's not the best in the world, no way, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, man. That's
no, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Have you got any problems in the Grampians that like stand out to you that you've developed that that are very memorable for you?
Yeah, I've got heaps that that I sort of that I really that I think back on really fondly. But there's not one that I sort of think about more than any others. I kind of like as you say, I like kind of squeezing stuff. So some of those kind of things. But I also like high, I like higher rats. I love a rats. So I don't know, maybe.
Have you got a good higher ret that's that someone listening can go and get on and get a bit of flavour?
I wouldn't want to send anyone onto it, but White Shadow is pretty awesome. It didn't have didn't have a second ascent for a long time, but it's had a few ascents now. But that's a pretty high arete at the back of the bleachers.
Yep,
and that's pretty cool. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm always kind of coming up with the next thing and on to the next one. And I don't know. I did a long-term project last year that I've probably spent more time on than anything I've ever tried. And I did that last year. That was pretty awesome. But then when I figured it out, it felt really easy. So I don't know. I guess that's climbing. When you do something, it always feels pretty straightforward. But I don't know, man. That's a tricky one.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Do you think that like the heyday of development in the Grampians is over in terms of bouldering development? I mean,
look, if these SPZs and SPAs and parks have their way, then for sure, that sort of southern Grampians area has got the potential for so much more development. But if that stuff stays closed, then I guess the heyday is over. Like, there's still a lot in that kind of Halls Gap Valley and the areas around there. So there's still more to do. But, in terms of the sheer amount of rock, all the best and all the largest areas are in that Southern Grampians range, in the Vic range. So, that's, that kind of really throws a spanner in the works for people. And, it kind of has really fucked with my psyche a little bit. Because, I don't really have anything. I love climbing and I will always climb, and I'll get by and I'll be happy to climb on Taipan, or happy to do boulders that I've done before, or try things in areas that I haven't been able to do before. But it's been weighing pretty heavily on my mind over the last 6 months for sure. So and it also impacts on where you want to be. Just a lot of kind of tossing up between Grampians, Blue Mountains, so for the future. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. What does climbing look like in that kind of post-development world where you can't put up any new lines? Or
well, there's no. They actually haven't said you can't put up any new lines at this stage. There was a voluntary moratorium, kind of proposed by the VCC, which I guess with the lack of good faith shown by parks, has been pretty well kiboshed now. Yeah. So that I guess any development you just that you were interested in doing or are doing, I would probably just keep under the radar now. And I wouldn't do it in the closed areas, but if you're outside of those areas and you want to do some new boulders or some new trad or whatever, I wouldn't be doing any sport routes. I definitely wouldn't be sinking bolts in anything.
Yeah.
But if you want to go out and do that, then I would just make sure you're in the right zones, and you can still do it. You just I wouldn't be telling anyone where it was, because that just creates potential problems.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
What's your you are on the Grampians Access Working Group?
I pulled out.
Yeah. Okay.
Just, I didn't really like the way things were going, not to blame anyone or anything like that, but there's also a lot of people putting in a lot of effort and a lot of time and have got much better expertise than me.
Yeah.
And as I said to you, I don't have a lot of time, which would, some people would disagree with, but I've got time for some things, but I didn't have the time to put in to that particular I couldn't make the meetings because they were always at night at bedtime for Park Man, and it was really hard, and I just felt like there were so many people who were putting so much more in that it was kind of unfair of me to even have my 2 cents worth.
Yeah.
So after that, I've paid up my money with the ACAV and just hope that something can be done.
Yeah.
So that's, as I said, it's pretty depressing, and it certainly plays on my mind.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but
look, I would say that there's been plenty of nights where I'm sitting up and reading stuff on social media or reading articles about it, and I get frustrated, and I don't sleep properly, and then it affects the rest of my life, and it has a toll. And maybe I didn't even realize that was happening until after we'd kind of been a few months in, you know. And I know that there's people putting so much energy into it, because I'll be speaking to those people like late at night, and then they're up at 6 a.m. in the morning still working on the same stuff.
Yeah. Some people who have got some amazing energy for it. I'm glad they're there. And like,
look, the one thing I take away from it is that that climbers are pretty determined people, and we can focus on something, a problem, and throw ourselves at it immensely for extended periods of time, multiple years at a time. We do that, like that's part of what we do, and
for sure,
and I take solace in that. Maybe that we can take that
forward.
Well,
people don't understand how important it is, you know. Like, I mean, if you have the time and the energy to read that stuff on social media, particularly after, you know, the ABC releases and the stuff that went out to the general public, some of the shit that people say on there is like, you know, ban all climbers, they're just dirtbags climbing on rocks, and, you know, that sort of stuff. It's like, man, you don't get how important this stuff is to people's lives. Like, as you know, as we've just spent the last however amount of time saying, like, that's all I've done for the last 30 years, you know, and I don't know what I'd do without it. And I live for it. I love it. Like, you know, it's, you know, changed my life. It's ruined relationships. It's made new relationships. It's, you know, it's dictated where I've bought land and built a house and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's really fucking important to people. And, you know, to have that taken away, you know, with a pen stroke by some twat from, you know, from Parks Victoria, who's just been sent in to, you know, to boot people out is, you know, it's painful.
Yeah.
You know, so. Yeah, it's something that will, you know, take a lot of time to undo. It's really easy to create these issues, you know, but it's really difficult to undo them once they've been done. So, yeah.
One thing I want to talk about is that you've been described as having a great love of smack talk, right? Trash talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where did you develop the cutting tongue?
Well, that's what happens when you're, you know, a little guy at a private school, a little Jewish guy at a private school. I don't know. I was always probably not I was probably self-inflicted actually, but I've always been lippy. I've always been loud and obnoxious.
Yeah.
And I just honed those skills over years, you know, to try to make it better. And you got to remember that most climbers are pretty genuine people, and so it's been really easy to smash them over the years. You know, there's a lot of people who are really good souls who I've brought undone over the years.
Low hanging fruit.
Oh, totally, man.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I'm not smart. I'm not clever. I just, you know, take the easy targets. Yeah.
So, can you give us some examples? What makes good smack talk?
Oh, you just got to hit people where it hurts, you know.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So if you're going to smack talk me, where would you start?
I don't know, mate. You haven't. I've got nothing to work with here. You've been too kind and too professional. You know.
True. Do you think it's teachable? Could you teach me how to do the smack talk?
Oh, not right away.
No.
You'd have to serve an apprenticeship, I suspect.
Okay.
Yeah, it would take a bit. You probably have to trail me around and brush my holds for me, and, you know, spot me on my projects and that sort of stuff. And then via osmosis, you might get a little bit, and I might throw you a few, you know, a few bites here and there, but.
Pick up the waves of the smack talk.
That's right. Yeah.
What role do you think that has in climbing, like, or in sport in general, the old trash talk?
I think it's been frowned upon traditionally in climbing. I like to think that I've brought it about with my group of mates. Well, I don't know. If you spend enough time with a group of people, you know, and if they're, you know, mildly humorous at least, that sort of stuff just naturally comes about. And, you know, as I said, I've had. Or maybe I didn't say, but I've had the same group of friends that I've been climbing with since I was maybe 19 or 20. So it's been more than 20 years that I've known most of these guys for, and you develop that rapport with people, you know? So, yeah. And we enjoy it. Most of us enjoy it. I definitely enjoy it. Maybe not always when, you know, if I'm on the receiving end, but no, I don't know. I'm just that kind of person. always enjoyed talking shit with my mates, and
Yeah.
I think most of my mates enjoy it as well.
Yeah.
But actually, all the guys who live in the Blue Mountains who I climbed with a lot growing up, like Julian Saunders, Simon Atkins, Dave Brayley, Christoph Gill, they're like 4 of my mates that I climbed with quite a lot, particularly Christoph, Julian, and Simon. And when I started jiu-jitsu, I don't know, 13 or 14 years ago, they were just relentless, giving me shit. Man hugging, cuddle club, blah, blah, blah. What do you reckon those guys all do now? Jiu-jitsu.
Really?
Absolutely addicted. 3 or 4 times a week, can't get enough. Lunchtime, nighttime, forget your kids, I'm going to jiu-jitsu. Addicted.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you led the pack when it comes to... It's Brazilian Ju Jitsu,
Yeah,
right?
correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been doing that for 13, 14
Oh,
years?
man. I had a big break. When I moved to the Grampians, I had like, I don't know, I had maybe 4 years, something like that, where I didn't train at all. So for the last 6 years, I've trained quite a bit. Breaks for climbing trips and climbing season. Like I don't generally train much over winter. It's sort of more, summer when I'm stuck on the peninsula working.
What's it all about? Like for climbers who wouldn't have a
It's
idea.
basically trying to fold people up while they're still wearing pajamas, essentially. It's essentially wrestling, like for the layman. So you start in a competition, you start standing, but when you're kind of training, you start sitting on a mat or on your knees, and you tap hands, and then basically it's simulated death. You're just trying to kill your mate, via chokes, locks. And submission holds. So you're trying to get people to tap.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know, it's good, clean fun.
So fighting with a rock, but it fights back this time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What do you get out of it that you don't maybe to get out of climbing?
Injured. Definitely injured. I've got some long-term injuries now that I think have probably originated more with jiu-jitsu than they did with climbing. But, I did a bit of, quite a bit of martial arts, growing up, and then I did some boxing, and then obviously the bouldering and climbing and jiu-jitsu have kind of all led to that sort of stuff. But I don't know, jiu-jitsu it's just another group of people that are not. It's become popular now in the last few years with the with the popularity of MMA and the UFC and all that sort of stuff. But jiu-jitsu, again, when I started, it was a fringe sport, and it was just everyone would call you a poofter for going and rolling on the mats with your mates, but it's always been fun. Like it's quite controlled, and you are trying to submit people, but you're not really trying to hurt them. Most of the people in a club are your friends, and there's always a couple of people that you might not get along with all that well, but even then you're not trying to kill people. You're just learning, and I don't know, it's a cool martial art. I've always been fascinated with that sort of stuff. So, and jiu-jitsu is a good one because it doesn't involve, especially as you get older, it doesn't involve striking. Whereas, I learned pretty early on that getting punched and kicked in the head doesn't have a lot of future.
Yeah, okay. Did the grip strength as a climber, were you like instantly good at it just because you had this crazy?
It was good early on when you fight against other white belts. When you start as a white belt, grip strength is kind of it's good to have, but as you progress, the more you hold on with the less ability, the more you get yourself in trouble. So, just as an example, one of the most common submissions is what's called an arm bar, which is basically someone lying perpendicular to you with your arm kind of bending back across their kind of hip bone, essentially, is one of the ways to do it. And the more you straighten your arms and try to push people away, or the more you hold on as they move away from you, the more you're going to straighten your arm, and it's easier for people to kind of capture that arm and arm bar it. And so it's kind of this real balance between using your strength and then learning when to let go. And, if you're stupid like me, it takes a long time to learn when to let go. So, and I still make those mistakes, but, I've just got the benefit of time on the mat on my side now, so I try not to get myself in as bad a predicaments as I used to. But yeah, unfortunately, everyone else gets better as you get better. That's the funny thing about jiu-jitsu. You think you get in, like with climbing, you progress, and your grades get a little bit better, and you're kind of always progressing. Whereas when you're fighting against another opponent and they train as much or more than you, they progress as well. So it can be really frustrating. You really just have to focus on yourself.
Yeah.
That's the thing with jiu-jitsu that, that you do with climbing anyway, I guess. You do, people compare themselves to other people like, why the fuck can't I climb V15 and, and that sort of stuff. I've always thought that. Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah.
Do you still feel like you're progressing with climbing?
I don't know. It's tricky with me because I don't really, as I said, I don't really project.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like I'm progressing on some of my projects.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether that's because I'm getting stronger or whether I'm just getting smarter or whether you just learn the moves. Like there's definitely problems that I've done over the years that I haven't gotten any stronger to do them. I've just you've almost overcome the problem just with time. You're just learning sequences and learning little micro beta and, you don't necessarily have to get stronger to do those things. You just have to climb the problem better, and I don't feel like I've dropped off, but I don't feel like I've gotten, 30% stronger. And I think there's little increments each year. Like this year in Rocklands, even though I was injured and I had to kind of leave a lot of the things that I wanted to do alone, I still had a pretty good trip and I still climb a similar grade to what I always have, this trip I would have liked to do a couple of harder things, but I still, climb about the same level that I always have, I reckon.
Yeah.
So maybe the problems are getting softer, I'm not sure. So
do you feel like you're still driven for more progress? I mean, what's the
Oh,
aim
for sure.
kind of now,
It's that balance between just wanting to climb and also wanting to improve, to do the things that you find. Like I've got quite a few projects out there that I'm close to, and then I've got a few projects that I am nowhere near.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of, do I go back now or do I try to do some specific training for it? And it's tricky with time and also climbing. It's really tricky to work out exactly what your weakness is on a particular problem, or overall that you want to work on. And I think training has only just gotten to the point now where it's kind of easier to focus on certain things and you can kind of improve all the time. Whereas, for me, my training was always just climb more, just boulder more, just campus, and that's probably why my elbows hurt and, bits and pieces are falling apart. But yeah.
How do you make it all work trying to keep it improving? And I imagine you've got restaurants, you run 2 restaurants, right? Yeah. You're newly a dad, as we mentioned. Yeah. You've got climbing and that's physical. And then you've got another sport that's physical. It's Brazilian Ju Jitsu. How do you keep improving when you've got all these other things stacked in the mix?
Well, my brother, who's my business partner, would suggest that I neglect work, which I try to. For most of the year, over winter, we where we live on the Mornington Peninsula is still reasonably seasonal, and so our restaurants are not crazy busy over winter, and so we work less. I don't work a huge amount basically outside of the summer months. Between December and January, it's mad. And then weekends up until Easter, and then obviously Easter's crazy. Yep. We work really hard over that period. You might work, the first few years we worked every day up until the 15th or 16th of January, from Boxing Day onwards. But now I don't work super hard. Having a kid definitely, throws your time askew a little bit. Yep. But yeah, if you're focused and you're committed, you can always find an hour in a day to do something. Yeah. I've got my wall at home. I've got a hangboard there. We've got Bayside about half an hour away, which is owned by my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, which is my wife's twin. And so we spend a fair bit of time there as well. So and because my wife climbs, that definitely helps. Yeah. If she wasn't into climbing, life would be a different story altogether. Yeah. I think if I was going to give anyone advice about, if you really want to climb lots in your life, then find a partner who does the same or is happy doing their own thing. They can have a different passion, but they need to be kind of psyched to do it on their own, I guess. If you really want to do a lot of something, that kind of needs to be the way it is, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did you get in the restaurant game of all things?
So family business. We grew up with my grandfather owned a chocolate shop actually, and we grew up working retail for him. So we used to work in there on weekends and sell chocolates. Generally, I ate more than I sold. So I guess that was always in the genes. And then my brother moved down here out of school when he was 18 or 19. Mum and Dad have always had a beach house down here. So he moved there, and then he started working hospitality. And then I worked hospitality through uni and traveling. And, I worked cafes, I worked functions, I worked whatever. I lied to work as a chef at one point. And then, Dave, who's my brother, opened a restaurant down here in Bouldering about, I don't know, let's say 10 years ago, probably more, probably 12 years ago. And we had always talked about going into business together, and then he sold his share in that restaurant, and then he went on a bit of a hiatus, and then we opened our first place 6 years ago. Yeah, and I was working as a school teacher at the time, and I have never looked back.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it's been good. It's it's been great being self-employed, and hospitality is pretty good fun. That's 99% of the time.
I've heard that from a British climber I met in a bouldering gym somewhere that you have really strong feelings about how a pizza should be made.
Who was that?
He used to climb with you over here. I met him in Christchurch. I can't remember his name. Sorry to that guy who might end up listening.
That's disappointing.
Yeah.
No, I don't know that I have really strong feelings about it, but I definitely think that if you're gonna sell a wood-fired pizza, it should be done well, and it should be done with good produce and that sort of thing. But I can't get on my high horse too much because I'm shit at making pizzas. I've done a summer of it, and I wouldn't do it again. I worked on pans the first couple of years that we were open because our other business partner Nathan, who's a mate of ours, is the chef, and he's the exec chef now for both. And so for the first couple of years, if he wanted a day off, I had to cook. And that was all well and good, when it wasn't crazy busy. So over summer, he would work 7 days, like double shift every day, which I will be eternally grateful to him for. But and then over winter, I'd do a couple of days on the pans, which was fine. But then it just got busy and our menu expanded. And, man, I was like Gordon Ramsay in that kitchen. It was just to myself. I didn't abuse other people, but I would lose my shit. Every time a docket come in, I'd be like, why the fuck are they ordering that? What? I'd ask the staff, why are they ordering that? Talk to them. Tell them to order something else. No, we're not going to do that.
They want something weird on the pizza?
No, not even. I would get stressed. The dockets would all come in at once. Everyone wants to eat at 6:30 or 7 o'clock, and you just get 15 dockets all at once. I'd just be like, fuck, I'm not doing this anymore. We need to hire some more staff.
No, fair play.
But yes, pizza should be made well. That's my, and no pineapple.
No pineapple.
No pineapple. No.
All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
That's a fact.
So you're a dad now. Mm-hmm. Your son is almost a year old?
Almost a year, yep. Little Parker, his name is.
Yeah, and I understand we talked about before, he's been out there climbing it. How's it been becoming a dad? I mean, has it changed your perspective on climbing and risk in climbing at all? Or?
Not really. I haven't really thought about it all that much, but, I'm no Alex Honnold. I'm not off, soloing all the time. I don't do a lot of soloing anymore. I did
high balls
still, but high balls are, I don't know. It's one of those things. You take a calculated risk, and particularly if it's a first ascent, you've probably done it a dozen times on a rope already anyway. So you've cleaned it, you've wrapped down it, you've given it a clean, you've chalked it up, you've tried the moves. And if you can do the moves on a rope, often those things are easier when you take the rope out and you just climb it. So yeah, I haven't had any moments where I've gone, should I really be doing this? But I haven't done anything. I don't think I've done anything super crazy since he's been around. I could be wrong, but my memory's not the best, and I don't have a catalogue of what I've done over the last sort of 18 months since Amy was pregnant. So I don't really know. I haven't really sat back and taken stock of that. But yeah, you want to be around for your kids and you want to be with them and that sort of stuff. So I guess if it came to something that I could potentially get seriously injured on, or worse, I'd have second thoughts. I don't know. Yeah. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, eh?
Yeah. How would you feel if he starts going out climbing all these massive high balls?
I don't know. I guess I'd respect whatever he wants to do, as long as he's doing it in a kind of calculated way. Like, I don't know. I'd like to think that he'll be a free spirit and he'll be outdoorsy. I would hope. I mean, he loves being outside now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
That works well for getting out there. And,
he loves being outside, loves being in the wind for some reason. He loves the wind. I don't know what it is about that, but he loves that. And in South Africa, we were able to be, the weather's always amazing over there. So we're outside all day, every day. Yeah. And he loved it. You can see them grow and you can see how much he's interested in what's going on around him. So, that was cool. But I guess it's one of those things I don't know. You want them to do whatever they want to do, as long as they're, kind of happy and healthy and committed to it, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to ponder that further. I'm sure that'll come with maturity. Yeah. But you've got a kid on the way as well, right?
I do have a kid on the way.
And have you been thinking about that at all?
Oh, I tell you do think about, do I want to run this out? Do I want to break that ankle? It would be really awkward right now to have a broken ankle.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. But not thinking about it in terms of anything other than, geez, it'd be inconvenient.
Yeah, that's right. That's always inconvenient though, isn't it? It doesn't matter whether you've got a child on the way or not. If you're injured and on crutches or whatever, but going home and telling your wife's probably I don't know what would be more painful, the ankle or that bit. So again, Amy's always been really understanding with that sort of stuff. She's she's been there when I've done quite a few like pretty sketchy high balls, and even there's only once where I've ever had her kind of going, do you really want to do that? And I was like, just don't ask me that question. Like, you can't, in my process of that stuff, you can't put doubts in my mind. Like, if I'm comfortable, I will do something. And if I'm not comfortable, I'll come back and try it again on a rope. Like, and particularly with the Grampian style of doing things, like you don't have this kind of, like in England, say you have this real ground up mentality of climbing, like particularly on the gritstone, or really mostly on the gritstone, where, there's this real sort of alpha way of doing things. And it's, if you go up something and you ground up it and it's E6 or whatever, then you've got bragging rights in the pub or whatever that night. Whereas in Australia, that doesn't have that kind of gravitas. So you just... if you throw a rope down something and top rope it a bunch of times and then solo it, doesn't really matter, So if you're sort of 50-50ing about something, then just throw a rope down it and make sure, and then climb it. So and now, especially if you're finding it, for the first time, then you just want to make sure those holes are not going to break. And So yes.
What's in the, I guess, taking stock where you are right now in the climbing journey of things, like what do you think's in the future for you with climbing?
There's still, plenty of bouldering, plenty of overseas trips, back to Rocklands next year, I think. Lots of unfinished business there. Try to be not as weak and not get injured. That'd be great. But I would like to do a lot more routes in the future. I love sport climbing. I absolutely love it. And I love trad climbing as well. And part of it, as I said, was just kind of being on my own. And then, I don't know, part of it is Amy's a boulderer. She's not really into climbing routes. But I would love to be climbing hard sport routes, or, even moderate sport routes and trad. I really miss that stuff. And I really would like to do some adventure climbing at some point. Yeah. But some of that, I've sort of held off on, because I know that some of it is not as technically or as physically difficult. It's, a lot of it's mental and like, it doesn't require you to be climbing grade 30 or, whatever to do. So I've sort of, some of it you can kind of hold off until you're a bit older, whereas bouldering, it's got a lifespan, climbing at a level that you want to climb at. If your top levels at, I don't know, V12 or something, you probably only got a certain amount of time to climb that, unless you're a Fred Nicole or, someone who can do that into their late 40s and 50s and, you Ben Moons and guys like that.
You're 40 now, right? You're
41, yeah.
And you're still going hard, right? So how
reasonably.
How much longer you reckon you can burn that for before you have to retire and climb trad like an old man?
I don't know. I don't like thinking about that. I definitely, my parents have been saying that shit for 20 years. Like, you're going to get too old. You're not going to be able to do it anymore. You need to start thinking about your body now. And it's like, forget it, man. I'm a lifer. I'm always going to climb. And it's just to what degree, and are you going to enjoy it if, you were a V14 climber? Are you going to still enjoy it if you're then a V10 climber? And the answer for me is yes. Like, I don't, I like climbing hard, like I love it, but I just love climbing, so if I can't climb super hard anymore or hard, whatever it is and how other people look at it, but if you can't climb hard anymore, then so be it. It's about the movement, it's about the problem solving, and it's about the community and being out in the bush. And yeah, I'll always love that stuff. So yeah, hopefully I can do it for, forever. Maybe. Yeah. So I'll always want to be in the bush. I'll always want to be outdoors. So yeah, I'll be doing that till the day I die for sure.
That's it, Australia. And all you internationals who are tuning in, thanks for listening. Head over to thelayback.com and subscribe to make sure you never miss out on an episode. I also share photos of the climber over there, and I share the YouTube video. We always record a YouTube video with these interviews, well, most of the time. And if you want to see what we look like in the flesh, you can go and watch the whole interview over there. I want to say a big thanks to Simon for sitting down with me, and thanks to his other half, Amy, who let me wrangle him away from dad duties for a couple of hours to record this podcast. Simon also wanted me to say thanks to his sponsors, that is Moon Climbing, Edelrude, and Red Chili. Shout out to you guys. I wanted to kind of finish up with a bit of trash talk because we didn't get a lot of trash talk in the podcast. So here's a clip of Arnie, that is the namesake of, or the nickname sake of Arnie's. That's Arnold Schwarzenegger, the king of trash talk, who is trash talking Lou Ferrigno, his rival for the Mr. Olympia in the movie Pumping Iron. I thought it'd be a good one to take us out.
They should have had the Olympia early on, so everybody could relax and enjoy the country.
They should have it in a month for him. He's not even in shape yet. I mean, gee, he didn't get the timing right. I'm telling you. A month from now would have been perfect for you. But then I get bigger too again. So doesn't matter what the hell. Let's get it over with. And if you retired this year, you just never had the Olympia, but you had twice the universe. What the hell? That's not too bad either.
Well, you could go on with the next 5 years.
It's amazing. Can you imagine the feeling I have 6 times Mr. Olympia?
I told you found the fountain of youth.
It's incredible. 6
You could go on forever.
It blows my mind when I think about it.
People are going to get so tired.
I called my mother yesterday already and I said I won. She says, congratulations, Arnold. Well, anyway, listen, guys. Why don't we go? You go and help him pump up. Calm him down.
I will.
Help him. Okay?
I will.
Don't screw him up this time.
I don't want you in our pumping room.
Okay?